Well, what a giant friggin' surprise, but Alabama won the national title in 2020.
Whoa, Todd, woo!
Going 13-0 in a shortened pandemic season. Can the Crimson Tide repeat in 2021? Well, the odds are against it. But in today's video, we're going to take a look at their 2021 schedule and see what kind of chance they got. Let's go. Y'all do me a favor and check this guy out. You getting tired of watching an idiot SEC homer like me mumble barely intelligible half sentences into this microphone all the time? Check out a Big 12 fan, D4 Sports. That's right, he's a Texas Shorthorn man, and he's been working hard the last couple of months over on his channel. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description of this video and the pinned comment. Make sure you check it out, D4 Sports. I consider him a friend of mine. He's putting in some good work here on YouTube. You guys check him out. Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And yes, today I'm going to force myself to talk about Alabama. I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess, as a Georgia fan. Some of the most devastating losses you could possibly imagine have come at the hands of Alabama over the last 4 or 5 seasons, but it is what it is. What are you going to do? We're going to take a look at their 2021 schedule today. We're going to try to compare it to the 2020 schedule, although it's about impossible to do with the schedules being so strange. Last year, Alabama, of course, in the SEC, which chose to play a 10-game conference-only schedule last year with no non-con games. This year, we're back to normal in the SEC and really all across college football. In the SEC, you play 8 conference games. You play the 6 teams from within your own division, and then you play 2 teams from the opposite division. In Alabama's case, they play Tennessee every single year from the East, and then a rotating opponent from the East. Here we go, Alabama Crimson Tide. All right, we'll take a look at the 2020 schedule real quick, although it shouldn't take long. They were undefeated, like I mentioned, 13-0 in a shortened season. Ran through most of the opponents they played. Not very many teams even gave Alabama much of a test, including in the playoffs where they beat Notre Dame 31-14 and then won the national title against Ohio State 52-24. I guess their 3 toughest games during the season came at home against Georgia, where Georgia did have a lead on Alabama at halftime before completely falling apart in the second half, and Alabama pulled away, winning the game 41-24. Georgia didn't score a single point in the second half of that game. The previous week, of course, they played Ole Miss, and it was a pretty interesting game up until, I don't know, about 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter or so. It was a one-score game for a large portion of the game. It was a lot of back-and-forth offense. Alabama would score, Ole Miss would score, Alabama would score, Ole Miss would score. Ole Miss never really able to take control of that game, and Alabama ended up winning 63-48. And then, of course, you had the SEC title game against Florida, probably the best offense that Alabama played all year. Florida hung with them. You got to give Florida credit in that game. They lost 52-46. I'll get it right eventually. Alabama won the game 52-46, winning the SEC title, punching their ticket to the playoffs. Disappointing loss for Florida. Playoff hopes on the line there in that game. But Alabama was just a really, really good team. You got to, I love to pick at Florida here on this channel, being a Georgia fan, but you got to give Florida credit. I mean, that was a great game. They hung in there to the end, really. Offense played amazing. Florida's defense let them down, but a lot of teams' defense let them down against Alabama last year, so it's hard really to fault Florida for that loss. I mean, Alabama was just a juggernaut yet again in 2020. All right, here's the 2021 schedule. We'll take a look at it. Can they repeat as national champions? Of course they can. They're the most talented team in America almost every single year. They are replacing a lot of parts on offense, but again, when you look at the recruiting, they're not hurting for talent. Bryce Young steps in at quarterback. He was one of the most highly rated players in America coming out of high school a couple of years ago. Played a little bit last year in mop-up duty behind Mac Jones. He'll be the starter this year. Looked good at times when he played last year. Looked good in the spring game this year. And again, everybody expects him to be an amazing player. They got some wide receivers to replace, a tight end to replace. They got to replace Najee Harris, but they're good to go at running back. Their defense could actually be a little bit better this year than what we saw even last year. The biggest loss for them, probably Patrick Surtain at corner. In my opinion, he was one of, if not the best corners in all of college football last season. It'll likely be a top 10 draft pick in tonight's first round of the NFL draft. The reason I say the odds are against Alabama repeating as national champions has nothing to do with the talent or the coaching on the team. Their talent and their coaching is A+++++. You couldn't have a more talented team. You definitely couldn't have a more well-coached team. But as good as Alabama's been under Nick Saban over the last 14 or 15 years, they've only won back-to-back national titles one time. And I say they've only done it one time. Most teams would kill to win back-to-back national titles only one time. But it just goes to show it is hard to do. Even winning the SEC, there's been 3 different teams win the SEC over the last 4 seasons. Alabama has won it twice. Georgia won it once. LSU won it once. It's just hard to repeat year over year over year over year. It's hard to keep the same level of intensity, enthusiasm, year after year after year. And that, more than anything else, I think is the reason Alabama doesn't have 12 national titles in the last 12 years instead of 6 in the last 12 years or whatever it is they have. Again, it's not lack of talent or coaching. It's just extremely hard to win one national title, never mind 2 in a row. Could they do it? Yes. Let's take a look at the schedule and see what kind of chance they have. All right, 8 conference games, 4 non-con games. Let's take a look at the non-con. They kick things off, start the season. Neutral site game, one of these kickoff classic type games against the Miami Hurricanes. Most people that I've heard from in the offseason don't expect this to be much of a game. They think Alabama will run away with this thing. And while I agree Miami is not on the level of an Alabama, I think Miami is a decent team. I think Miami has a chance to be a legitimate top 15 team this year. Maybe top 10. It depends a lot, I think, on De'Aaron King, who chose to come back this year for one final season at Miami. He's rehabbing an injury that he suffered late last season. Obviously, he would have to have the game of his life here for Miami to have any chance to win this game. This is an exciting game, though. These two teams played for the national title back in, 1992, when Gene Stallings won his national title at Alabama. A game that was just absolutely loaded with future NFL superstars on both sides of the ball. One of the more memorable national title games, I think, at least in my opinion, over the last 40 years or so. It'll be an interesting game. It's one that everybody will watch. Even if you're one of the people that thinks Alabama's going to dominate here, it's a game that most people, I think, will watch. The problem for Miami, beyond the obvious, which is that Alabama is just really, really good, extra time to prepare, it makes it that much harder to beat Alabama. Go back and look at Nick Saban's record in opening week games, and they've played in several of these big opening games, and more times than not, it hasn't been close. Alabama has really dominated these week 1 Power 5 non-con matchups. Week 2, another non-con game for Alabama at home, this time against Mercer, a smaller school here in the state of Georgia. Alabama will be a 100-point favorite in that game. They'll win that game by as much as they want to, but, there it is, Mercer Bears. Week 3, they have their first SEC game, comes on the road at Florida. Florida, of course, a team from the East, so they're on the rotating schedule to play Alabama every 6 or 7 years. This is the year. A good time to play Florida if you're Alabama. They're replacing their entire offense. We talked about what Alabama loses with Mac Jones and all those wide receivers and Najee Harris. Florida loses about 95% of its offense from last year. Kyle Trask is gone. Kyle Pitts is gone. They were 2 of the best players, not just in the SEC, but in America last year. They lose 2 of their other starting wide receivers. They are basically replacing their entire offense. Their defense was bordering on abysmal last year. Can it be that bad again? Yes, it could. I don't know that it will, but it could. They still have Todd Grantham, which is a controversial decision by Dan Mullen, even amongst Florida fans. A lot of the fans have seen enough of Todd Grantham, the defensive coordinator. They wanted him gone. Dan Mullen chose to keep him. We'll see how that works out. You got to go play there. It's an interesting game. If Florida had an offense like they had last year, you'd have to give Florida a good chance in this game at home. I mean, they almost beat Alabama last year in a neutral site SEC title game when Alabama had that loaded offense. If Florida had some of those pieces coming back this year, you'd have to give Florida. Florida may even, if Florida had their offense from last year in this game, they may even be favored this go-round. We'll see how Florida looks offensively. They'll get a couple of games to sort of get the kinks worked out. Emory Jones, I guess, is going to be the starting quarterback. I'm not very high on him, but we'll see how he does. You follow that up with another non-con game at home against Southern Miss, a game that clearly you should win. And then a game at home against Ole Miss, and this will be an interesting game too. You know, Lane Kiffin had that Ole Miss offense rolling last year with no offseason. Last year was his first year at Ole Miss, and of course, you know, we had no spring practice. The offseason was all messed up because of the pandemic, and Lane Kiffin had that offense rolling. They gave Alabama fits in that game. They ran up and down the field on Alabama last year. A very exciting game. Alabama won by a couple of scores, but it was a very exciting game to watch. Alabama gets them at home. Huge advantage, obviously. Lane Kiffin would like nothing more than to beat Nick Saban. I mean, let's be real. Lane Kiffin has said all the right things since he came to Ole Miss. He hasn't really badmouthed Nick Saban or Alabama or anything like that. But it did not end well in his time there. And even when he was there, Nick Saban just berated him constantly on the sideline. I mean, when you would watch an Alabama game when Lane Kiffin was the offensive coordinator there, the cameras spent just as much time showing Nick Saban yelling at Lane Kiffin as they did showing the actual game. No love lost, I don't think, between Nick Saban and Lane Kiffin. And Lane, like I said, Lane Kiffin would love nothing more than to become the first former Saban assistant to ever beat Nick Saban. Can he do it? I don't know. It's in Alabama. Alabama will be a favorite for sure. Then you go on the road and play at Texas A&M, maybe the game of the year in the SEC West. If Texas A&M can get the quarterback situation figured out, because they lost Kellen Mond, who was a starter there forever, but they've got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. They had a young offense last year with the exception of Kellen Mond. If the quarterback works out there, this could be an interesting game. They got to play there at Texas A&M. Texas A&M hasn't beat Alabama since the Johnny Manziel game. This will be a hell of a game. Texas A&M, if they're undefeated at this point, might even be a slight favorite in this game. I don't know that they can pull it off. It's hard to beat Nick Saban. I mean, we all know that. But this will be the game of the year, I think, in the SEC West. I think these are probably the two best teams in the West this year, Texas A&M and Alabama. Alabama's got to travel and play there. If we have full stadiums, Texas A&M can pack them in. That'll be an interesting matchup there. Back-to-back road games as you follow that up at Mississippi State. Mississippi State, another team with an offensive-minded coach that got his start last year at Mississippi State, and Mike Leach, our buddy Bigfoot, formerly of Washington State, formerly of Texas Tech prior to that. Another guy that loves to throw the ball all over the place. They had that amazing win, or what we thought was an amazing win last year in week 1 over LSU, when they went for over 1,000 yards and threw for 800 yards or whatever it was. That ended up being the pinnacle last year for Mississippi State. It was sort of downhill from there for them. They weren't very impressive after that. And we found out that LSU win was a little bit of a fluke, as LSU was just a terrible team last year. That's a game Alabama will be favored in, though. Is there enough cowbell for Mississippi State to pull off that win? I don't know. Maybe if they lose at Texas A&M and you catch them demoralized or something like that, I don't know. Maybe they look past you because they have a rivalry the next week against Tennessee. I don't know. We'll see. Then there's that Tennessee game. You get them at home. Tennessee, again, with a brand-new coaching staff, which is a pattern for them every 3 years. They got a brand-new coaching staff in there. Tennessee's got no talent at all. They lost 25 players to the transfer portal, including their best player on offense and their best player on defense. Brand new coaching staff. It's going to be a rough year for Tennessee. Alabama should win that one fairly easily. Then you get your bye week. Pretty good time for a bye week. It seems like you always take it before the LSU game. That's the case again in 2021. Listen, LSU is not going to be as bad as they were last year. That's just not going to happen. Are they going 15-0 and like the Joe Burrow year from 2019? No, I don't think they're doing that either. They're going to be somewhere in between. But anybody thinks like last year is going to be the norm for LSU now, you're just not paying attention. They lost almost their entire team from 2019 to the NFL draft. So they were behind the 8 ball to start with there. And then they had a couple of key players on both sides of the ball opt out of the season for pandemic reasons. It was just a nightmare scenario for LSU. So they're not going to be that bad again. There's some distractions there, though. A lot going on at LSU with the NCAA, too. Them in Tennessee. The NCAA might as well set up offices in Knoxville and Baton Rouge. Alabama will likely win that game, I would assume. Then you get your last non-con game of the year against New Mexico State. You'll be a 100-point favorite there. Last 2 games of the year, home against Arkansas and on the road at Auburn. Arkansas, year 2 under Sam Pittman. They surprised some people last year. They were better than what I think people thought they would be. Their record wasn't amazing. I think they won 3 games. But again, that was 3 SEC games. Talking about a team in Arkansas that hadn't won an SEC game at all in 2 complete seasons. So to win 3 last year, first year for Sam Pittman, was pretty remarkable. And then, of course, the Iron Bowl, the rivalry game at Alabama to end things in the regular season. Auburn also at Auburn. I'm sorry, not Alabama, at Auburn. Auburn also with a brand new coaching staff this year. Finally getting rid of Gus Malzahn. Nick Saban has struggled at Auburn. I mean, that's just a fact. There's not too many things you can point to say, Nick Saban's kind of struggled with that. If you're gonna find something, it's at Auburn. Now that was under Gus Malzahn. We'll see what happens with the new staff in there from Boise State. Everyone watches this game every year because you have to. If you're a college football fan, it's some kind of a law. You have to watch the Iron Bowl. So we'll watch it. I don't know how many people expect this game to be close, but nevertheless, it's the Iron Bowl, Alabama at Auburn, to wrap up the 2021 season, SEC championship the week after that. Comparing this schedule to last year's, well, you had to play Georgia last year, which was a top 5 team. You don't have to play them this year. You swap them out basically for Florida. Florida's been a top 10 team basically the last 3 seasons. I don't know if they'll be a top 10 team this year. It's going to depend on that offense, clearly, and I just don't think they can duplicate this year what they had last year. I just don't see it happening. I personally don't have any faith in Todd Grantham. Maybe the defense will be a little bit better. I don't know, but Todd Grantham was at Georgia for a long time, and the majority of Georgia fans, myself included, couldn't wait for him to get gone from there. I'm just not a big believer in Todd Grantham as an SEC defensive coordinator for a whole bunch of reasons I'm not going to get into here. I can make a whole video just on Todd Grantham, but it is what it is. But your non-con games, other than the Miami game, it's 3 cakewalks, really. I mean, Mercer, Southern Miss, and New Mexico State. We'll see what happens in the Miami game. You'll be a significant favorite. Most people expect you to win. So not too big of a concern there with the non-con. Road games, I mean, really what jumps out is the at Texas A&M, at Mississippi State situation. And then you have Ole Miss at home on the front end of that. I do think Ole Miss will be a pretty good team, and I do think Ole Miss is going to beat somebody that people don't see coming. Who that somebody is, that is anyone's guess at this point. Could it be Alabama? Maybe. And then, of course, what I think is probably your toughest game of the season on the road at Texas A&M follows that, and then at Mississippi State, the back end of a 2-week-in-a-row road stretch. So there you go. The Alabama Crimson Tide 2021 college football schedule. I mean, is anybody – here's what I want to know. This isn't a prediction video. I do my prediction videos starting in June. I do about 50 teams, and I go through the schedule just like this here, and I give you a win and a loss for every single game on the schedule and then an overall record. So I'll start that in June. But I want to know from you guys and girls down below, is there anybody that thinks Alabama's losing 2 games? Anybody? There may be some people out there who think they lose 1. I think the majority of people are going to just go, well, it's Alabama. They're going 12-0. And you may be right. I don't know. You may be right. But there's going to be a lot of people who expect Alabama to lose at least 1 game this year, right? Forget trying to – I don't even care what game you think it is. But is there anybody that thinks they will lose 2 or more? Anybody? I don't know. You really have to stretch and try to convince yourself to find 2 losses on this schedule, I think. Is it possible? Of course, anything's possible. They lost a couple of games 2 seasons ago. Anything's possible. Let me know. Any way they lose 2 or more games, let me know down below. Anyway, as usual, I appreciate all of you watching. If you're enjoying these schedule previews that I've been putting out, I've been doing a ton of them here over the last couple of weeks. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and pick one of these videos and share it somewhere. Here, share this one. Hit the copy link button. Post this video on your Facebook page, your Instagram, your Twitter, wherever you do your social media, whatever the case. It's a big help to me, and I would really appreciate it. All right, thanks for watching. Have a great morning.